Hey guys, it's KJ from the Scariest Movie Ever channel on YouTube. Technology is moving forward at a frightening rate. In a lot of different aspects. Primarily I'm looking at transhumanism. I'm also looking at how they're creating a post-human world now. Additionally, we're looking at the idea of virtual reality. Literally plugging human beings into a matrix. There's several stories I just wanted to share with you on this video and show you what I'm talking about and what I'm seeing. So let's get started. So the story I want to lead off with is a fairly new story and definitely corresponds with all these other stories I wanted to share with you and this whole subject in general. Have you heard of the My Activity tab or the My Activity tool on Google? The My Activity tab is a tool that shows you what Google knows about you. I ran it on myself and it really blew me away. Everything that they're going to show you, all the activity you've done online that they're actually tracking. And there's a way you can disable this. I disabled it on my end, but I think it's very important you guys check this out for your own safety, for your own internet anonymity, the best you can, I guess. So let's check out some of the story. So the story says, depending on which of its tools we use, Google knows what we think, what we need, what we desire, our political and spiritual beliefs, our age, our gender, what music we listen to, what we watch, what we read, where we've been, where we plan to go, where we work, where we hang out, where we live, who we meet, where we shop, when we shop, what we buy, how much money we're worth, how much we spend, and how much energy we consume. How does it amass all that data? Through Google search, the Chrome browser, Gmail, Google News, Google+, Book Search, YouTube, Picasa, Translation, Maps, Street Views, Waze, Nest, and, well, the list keeps going and growing as Google acquires more companies and more data crunching ability. And I'll stop there. I just wanted to share this with you folks. This is very, very, very important information as far as I'm concerned. Again, it really blew me away how much they really track us and all the stuff they know about us. So make sure you check out the My Activity tab or tool on Google. You may be blown away at all the stuff they have on you, and make sure you disable that for your own protection. So we know that it's a big part of the Illuminati plan to wipe out a large portion of humanity. These Luciferians are literally in war against God and against God's children. And you can reference a lot of their own writings throughout the years to show that this is a part of the plan. World War III is a part of the plan. Wiping out a large part of humanity is a part of the plan. That way what's left will be a lot easier to control. And I think it's incredibly important to know this and to understand this if we're going to understand why there's so much transhumanism taking place right now, research in transhumanism, and how technology is growing, becoming such a part of our everyday world in so many ways. It really seems as if this beast system is removing the human component from so many areas of our lives and replacing it with robots and artificial intelligence. It's as if they're preparing for a post-human world. Here's a really interesting article from a website called learningmind.com, the 5 creepiest advances in artificial intelligence. The schizophrenic robot. Scientists at the University of Texas Austin have simulated mental illness for a computer, testing schizophrenia on artificial intelligence units. The test subject is Discern, D-I-S-C-E-R-N, a supercomputer that functions as a biological neural network and operates using the principles of how human brain functions. In their attempt to recreate the mechanism behind schizophrenia, the scientists have applied the concepts described in the theory of hyperlearning, which states that schizophrenic brain processes and stores too much information too thoroughly by memorizing everything, even the unnecessary details. The researchers then emulated the schizophrenic brain on artificial intelligence by overloading the computer with many stories. At one point, the computer claimed responsibility for a terrorist act, telling researchers about setting off a bomb. Artificial intelligence has reported this incident because of confusion with a third-party story about the explosion by terrorists, mixed in with its own memory. In another case, the computer began to talk about itself as a third person because it could not make out what exactly it was at that very moment. The Robot Deceiver. Professor Roland Arkin from the School of Interactive Computing at the University of Georgia presented the results of an experiment in which scientists were able to teach a group of robots to cheat and deceive. The strategy for such fraudulent behavior was based on the behavior of birds and squirrels. The experiment involved two robots. The first robot had to find a place to hide, and the second robot was to discover where the first robot was hiding. The robots had to go through an obstacle course with pre-installed physical objects, which turned over as the robots moved along. The first robot led the way, and the second one followed the first robot by analyzing tracks left along the path. After a while, the hiding robot started deliberately overturning obstacles just to create a diversion, and was hiding somewhere away from the mess he had left behind. This strategy was not originally programmed. The robot has developed its own strategy through trial and error. After all, this was just a harmless university experiment, right? The Ruthless Robot. The scientists at the Laboratory of Intelligent Systems put a group of robots in the same room with predetermined sources of food and poison. Machines earned points for being closest to the food and lost points if they approached sources of poison. All machines involved in the experiment were fitted with small blue lights, flashing erratically, as well as a sensor camera which helped to identify the light from the lamps of other robots. The robots were able to turn off their lights if needed. When the experiment began, it did not take too long for the robots to realize that the largest concentration of blue lights was at the point where the other robots congregated, that is, next to the food. It turned out that by blinking their lights, the robots showed the competitors where the correct source was located. After several phases of the experiment, almost all of the robots turned off their, quote, beacons, refusing to help each other. But this was not the only outcome of this experiment. Some of the other bots managed to divert other bots away from the food by blinking more intensely. The Supercomputer with Imagination. Among the many projects by the Google company, which, without a doubt, one day will put an end to our civilization, I agree, there is one project that stands out. It's a self-learning computer with a neural network simulation system. In an experiment, this supercomputer was given free access to the internet and the ability to examine the contents of the network. There were no restrictions or guidelines. The powerful superintelligence was simply allowed to explore the entire human history and experience. And what do you think this supercomputer has chosen out of all this wealth of information? It began browsing through images of kittens. Yes, as it turned out, we all use the internet the same way, no matter who we are. Human beings are high-tech digital intelligence. A little later, Google has discovered that the computer has even developed its own concept of what a kitten should look like by independently generating the image with an analog to our cerebral cortex and based on a review of photographs seen earlier. And finally, the Robot Prophet. Nautilus is another self-learning supercomputer. This unit was fed millions of newspaper articles starting from 1945 by basing its search on two criteria: the nature of the publication and location. Using this wealth of information about past events, the computer was asked to come up with suggestions on what would happen in the future, and these turned out to be surprisingly accurate guesses. How accurate? Well, for example, it located bin Laden. I'll just add in that most of us realize the whole bin Laden story was bunk, alright? I mean, the whole family, the bin Laden family, is friends of the Bush family to begin with. The same task took 11 years, 2 wars, 2 presidents, and billions of dollars for the U.S. government and its allies. The Nautilus project has taken much less time, and all that was done was just the analysis of the news pertaining to the terrorist leader and connecting dots in his probable whereabouts. As a result of its analysis, the Nautilus has narrowed the search area to a 200-kilometer zone in the northern Pakistan area where Osama's refuge had been discovered. So the experiment with the Nautilus was retrospective in nature. The computer was given an opportunity to predict events which had already happened. Now, scientists are contemplating allowing the machine to predict present-day future events. So it's pretty obvious at this point how deeply entrenched Google is in this futurist movement, this transhumanist movement. Key point to make with that is Ray Kurzweil. Have you heard of this guy? Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. You should know the name. He's at the forefront of this thought. Bill Gates called Ray the best person I know at predicting the future of artificial intelligence. Ray is also amazing at predicting a lot more beyond just AI. This post looks at his very incredible predictions for the next 20 years. So who is Ray Kurzweil? He has received 20 honorary doctorates, has been awarded honors from 3 U.S. presidents, and has authored 7 books. He is the principal inventor of many technologies ranging from the first CCD flatbed scanner to the first print-to-speech reading machine for the blind. He is also the chancellor and co-founder of Singularity University and the guy tagged by Larry Page to direct artificial intelligence development at Google. He's actually made a lot of predictions that came true over the last 25 years. One of them is that a computer would defeat a world chess champion by 1998. Then in 1997, IBM's Deep Blue defeated Garry Kasparov. And he said that PCs would be capable of answering queries by accessing information wirelessly via the internet by 2010, and he was right, of course, to say the least. And that by the early 2000s, exoskeletal limbs would let the disabled walk. Companies like Exobionics and others now have technology that does just this and much more. And of course, there's several other predictions. You can check out those as well. But let's go down here to some of his predictions for the next 25 years. It says the above represent only a few of the predictions Ray has made. While he hasn't been precisely right to the exact year, his track record is stunningly good. By the late 2010s, glasses will beam images directly onto the retina. 10 terabytes of computing power, roughly the same as the human brain, will cost about $1,000. By the 2020s, most diseases will go away as nanobots become smarter than current medical technology. Normal human eating can be replaced by nanosystems. The Turing test begins to be passable. Self-driving cars begin to take over the roads, and people won't be allowed to drive on highways. And it's interesting what he's saying right here. By the 2020s, most diseases will go away as nanobots become smarter. Also talking about humans literally eating nanosystems. Now that instantly reminded me of one of our favorite subjects in this community, let's say, of investigators, and that's the black goo, or programmable matter. And as for predictive programming, we've seen this black goo in tons of television shows and movies. This is an image from the X-Files. And here's another image, and this is from the television series Helix on the Sci-Fi Network. Once again, the black goo, programmable matter, alien programmable matter. We're not only seeing the black goo in media, in entertainment, television, movies, and whatnot. It's even turning up in our real news. Now, I'm not saying this is programmable matter. I don't really know what this is, but even the people that were on the scene couldn't figure out what this is. But just a few months ago in Michigan, this black goo rained down from the sky and coated everything in this town. So whether this is actually programmable matter or not, the black goo's making the news. He also says by the 2030s, virtual reality will begin to feel 100% real. We will be able to upload our mind consciousness by the end of the decade. I'm going to show you some stories that relate to that right there as well. He also says by the 2040s, non-biological intelligence will be 1 billion times more capable than biological intelligence. Nanotech foglets will be able to make food out of thin air and create any object in the physical world at a whim. Wow. And by 2045, we will multiply our intelligence 1 billion-fold by linking wirelessly from our neocortex to a synthetic neocortex in the cloud. And that is when you are firmly entrenched in the matrix. They are literally showing you that they want to plug all of us into a virtual matrix. And in reference back to the dates that Kurzweil was predicting, I think all this stuff is coming on a whole lot quicker than, say, 10, 15, 20 years from now. Google acquires artificial intelligence startup DeepMind for more than $500 million. It says this is the latest move by Google to fill out its roster of artificial intelligence experts. And, according to Recode, the acquisition was reportedly led by Google CEO Larry Page. If all 3 of DeepMind's founders work for Google, they will join inventor, entrepreneur, author, and futurist, that's right, Ray Kurzweil, who was hired in 2012 as a director of engineering focused on machine learning and language processing. They're assembling the teams to make all of this a reality, to ultimately plug humanity, what's left of it, into the matrix. Or a matrix. So spiritually speaking, I've always seen the transhumanist movement, the AI movement, and all that stuff is very much Antichrist, if you will, or satanic, in the sense that it goes against the natural order of our Creator. It's taking the human out of humanity. So it's very interesting that even these spiritual implications of all this are being revealed by some of the people involved themselves. This is from Elon Musk. With artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. Tesla chief executive Elon Musk has warned about artificial intelligence before, tweeting that it could be more dangerous than nuclear weapons. Speaking Friday at the MIT Aeronautics and Astronautics Department Centennial Symposium, Musk called it our biggest existential threat. He said, "I think we should be very careful about artificial intelligence. If I were to guess like what our biggest existential threat is, it's probably that. So we need to be very careful with the artificial intelligence. Increasingly, scientists think there should be some regulatory oversight, maybe at the national and international level, just to make sure that we don't do something very foolish. With artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. In all those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, it's like, yeah, he's sure he can control the demon. Didn't quite work out." So on a side note, I've covered this subject as well. I just want to retouch on it for a moment. It's the idea that we have all these movies coming out, especially over the last 5 years or so, about demon possession, right? And of course, there's also been tons of these movies about possessed babies, women pregnant with these babies that are possessed by a demon or the devil. And the one underlying message in all of these satanically inspired films is that the devil always wins. The demons win. You can't defeat these things no matter what. Of course, it's all a part of the greater psychological operation when it comes to these possessed films and satanic films. So then we have some creepy stories like this. This is from about a year ago, and this right here is from naturalnews.com. First fatality of the robot apocalypse? ? Robot grabs factory worker and crushes him to death. It was designed to assemble vehicles at a Volkswagen plant in Germany, but a factory robot recently malfunctioned and killed a man, according to reports. The 22-year-old contractor died from severe impact injuries after the robot reportedly grabbed him, threw him up against a metal plate, and injured him so badly that he later died at the hospital. The horrific incident occurred at a Volkswagen assembly plant in the city of Bonntal. The man had reportedly been setting up and programming the stationary robot when it suddenly, to quote one report, came to life and committed this shocking act of violence. A plant spokesman told the media that it must have been human error that caused the robot to grab the VW worker, since it was designed to remain stationary and perform various tasks such as picking up tools and installing automotive parts. The robot was reportedly located inside a special safety cage meant to protect against such incidents, which in this case only occurred because the man was inside at the time. The deeper implications of this disturbing tragedy are suggestive of an ominous future for humans living in an increasingly robot-dominated world. Robots are taking over many aspects of the world, including the transfer of information, the assembly of machines, and even the growing and harvesting of food. So I've been saying for several years now, they're definitely fudging the unemployment numbers. I'm sure you guys would agree with that. I mean, just look at reality. Look at your own life. Look at your friends' lives, family, friends of friends, stuff like this, acquaintances. And look at how many people are having trouble keeping jobs, finding jobs. To add to that, over the last couple of years, tons of major retailers have been shutting down all throughout America. This story is from a couple of years ago. 9 major retailers closing the most stores. Check this stuff out for yourself, folks, but there's more. Because here's a more recent story from 2016. 13 of the biggest retailers in America are closing stores. So I'm showing you this stuff in relation to the post-human movement. We're seeing a lot of this post-human type setup taking place over the last few years. We know the end game, right? We know what's in the Bible as far as a one-world system, one-world religion, one-world monetary system, Antichrist leader, all of this, right? And now we've seen all this stuff taking place for the last few years that certainly seems to be adding to that truth, showing us all these blocks being put in place. So on one hand we have the rise of the robots, and on the other hand we're seeing things like this. Some of the biggest retailers in America are closing their stores. And it's not just in America. This kind of a thing is taking place all over the world. Now here's just one example. When we talk about the post-human movement, we're seeing robots are taking a lot of our jobs, right? It used to be, they're taking our jobs, the Mexicans are taking our jobs. Remember that? You hear all that? It's the robots. It's the robots you got to worry about. New KFC restaurant run entirely by robots. And this is from Wired.com. But we got a lot of stories like this coming out too. Better than human. Why robots will and must take our jobs. It was interesting with this article. Look at this picture here. That's Jimmy Fallon. Somehow they got Jimmy Fallon. And then, of course, here he is. On the cover of Wired magazine, the robots take over. Somebody in Jimmy Fallon's position is seriously controlled, right? They're completely and totally controlled. So they are going to be used to push forward all of these New World Order type agendas. Shouldn't come as a surprise. And this here's from the article. It says, it may be hard to believe, but before the end of this century, 70% of today's occupations will likewise be replaced by automation. Yes, dear reader, even you will have your job taken away by machines. In other words, robot replacement is just a matter of time. This upheaval is being led by a second wave of automation, one that is centered on artificial cognition, cheap sensors, machine learning, and distributed smarts. This deep automation will touch all jobs, from manual labor to knowledge work. And again, speaking of that post-human society, we have stories like this. Artificial intelligence now able to reproduce. Scientists in Amsterdam have created the world's first batch of robots that can reproduce and create offspring, and experts have warned that the artificial intelligence could pose a real threat to humans in the coming years. The new robots have been programmed with a genome that enables them to communicate with each other, learn, and evolve by creating their own new genomes with new information they have learned. Thus, a new robot is born in a way that resembles evolution in nature. So what could be so advantageous about teaching robots to reproduce themselves in this manner? It says in the Robot Baby Project in Amsterdam, scientists have developed a way for robots to have sex and pass on their DNA to offspring. There's a lot of predictive programming and social engineering obviously associated with Hollywood and all forms of entertainment. And we've seen Hollywood tackle the idea of artificial intelligence in tons of movies. And it's interesting, I think some of these are actually warnings. We can't just throw it all out and say, it's all from Hollywood, so it's all bad. I mean, there's some storytellers out there that are really trying to get across some good information. Regardless of how satanic that Hollywood system is, I think some decent people can still make it through and get some decent information out there. And oftentimes they're showing us what could happen to us in our future if we don't take some form of precaution. Stanley Kubrick gave us HAL in his movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. We also have Ex Machina, which was about a young programmer being invited by his employer to evaluate this humanoid AI. And once again, this humanoid was trying to become more human. Needless to say, things didn't turn out so well. There's also the 2012 movie Robot and Frank, once again about robots trying to achieve human emotion or become more human. I, Robot from 2004 borrowed its name from a collection of short stories by the author Isaac Asimov. It is about an AI supercomputer called Vicky that decides the only way to ensure the survival of the human race is to strip individual humans of their free will. Of course, we had the Matrix movies, Agent Smith. Who can forget Agent Smith? He's one of the main bad guys in this dystopian trilogy. He was an AI program that hunted down humans who haven't already become mere wetware for an all-powerful machine. Then we had the 2013 movie Her, which offered a look at our close relationship with technology. The main character, played by Joaquin Phoenix, fell in love with an AI operating system named Samantha. And of course we had Transcendence, which starred Johnny Depp as Will Castor, who uploaded his being into a futuristic quantum computer. Castor's digital form worked to eradicate pollution and disease and also started to control people's minds. This is an old school one from 1977 called Demon Seed. It was a horror film about an AI supercomputer that became obsessed with its creator's wife. And of course, we can't mention AI without talking about Blade Runner. Harrison Ford played the main character, Rick Deckard, in the 1982 science fiction classic film. Deckard's job was to hunt down and kill rogue replicants, the sometimes lonely and often pissed off human-like androids with a short lifespan that return to Earth from which they'd been banned. Now this one's pretty crazy. I don't know if you guys have seen these images or not, but it's definitely worth checking out. Google's artificial intelligence can dream, and here's what it looks like. So software engineers at Google had been analyzing their dreams of their computers, and it turns out that the androids do dream of electric sheep and much more, also pig snails, camel birds, and dogfish. This conclusion has been made after testing the ability of Google's servers to recognize and create images of commonplace objects, for example bananas and measuring cups. The result of the experiment was pretty insane. The Google artificial neural network was like a computer brain. It inspired the central nervous system of animals. When the engineers feed the network an image, the first layer of neurons have a look at it. This layer then talks, quote-unquote, to the next layer, which then has a go at processing the image. And this process is repeated 10 to 30 times, with each layer identifying key features and isolating them until it has figured out what the image actually is. So then the neural network tells us what it has identified the object to be, sometimes with little success, but this is the process behind the image recognition. And at times the results are staggering. The Google team then realized that they could reverse the process, so they gave the artificial neural network an object and asked it to create an image of that object. The computer then tried to associate it with specific features. So when we want a picture of a fork, the computer should figure out that the defining features of a fork are 2 to 4 tines and a handle, but things like size, color, and orientation aren't as important. These computers, it turns out, have the ability to see images and objects in a way that artists can only dream of replicating. But to me it's very interesting. You're literally getting a glimpse into the mind of AI, a glimpse into the mind of artificial intelligence. So it's interesting because we hear from the mouths of the technicians and scientists themselves. They understand the basic process here, but oftentimes it's the results that are very shocking even to them, or unexpected. So me personally, when I look at all these images, they remind me of something from my youth. Many years ago, in my late teens and very early 20s, I was big into the psychedelic experience. And that's exactly what these images remind me of. I also think it's interesting how often you'll find the eye, a lot of all-seeing eyes throughout all these pictures. So what else do they have in store? Well, never fear. If your robot is not human enough, perhaps we can download a dead relative's personality into your robot for you, or maybe an old friend or lover or husband or wife or whatever. So what is the end game? This image right here is so incredibly iconic. This is Mark Zuckerberg at Samsung's Galaxy S7 launch event. This didn't take place very long ago. And look at the masses of people in this audience, all of them connected to their virtual reality. And obviously I think this is the end game. As they dehumanize us, because that's what they're doing, as they dehumanize us humans. Well, this is their answer. They dehumanize the humans, but they're making the robots more human. Right? It's very simple stuff. Very basic. They're taking what was good and calling it bad, and taking what was bad and calling it good in many respects, right? What's left of humanity they want to plug into the Matrix. And perhaps this will be the idol worship of the Antichrist age. And they'll have us dreaming electronic Antichrist dreams forever.